Welcome to Bobcat TV. I'll be your host, Ryan Smoyer. This is the live coverage of the 2017 Bobcat Challenge Draft. I'm joined by my partner over here, Andrew Stepp, Coach CJ Wamsley, and the legend Craig Moore. We'll have a pre-draft show here. We'll discuss the captains first, guys. What do you have on the five captains in their draft strategies for this upcoming draft? CJ?
Well, for me, I think that the main thing is to figure out what each guy's good at. So, for example, I know that there's certain guys, Bredeson being one, may struggle with certain events, so he's going to have to draft kind of according to that. When it comes to conditioning, there's really a guy or two that's really good. Some of the other guys' strengths may be in the weight room a little bit more. So they're going to have to just figure out their drafts based on what they do well and what they don't do well.
So our five captains this year will be Jerry Salisbury, Corey Blessing, Tony Giannini, Jake Rowan, and who's Bredeson. Nick Bredeson. Looking at those five captains, two of them being from Cleveland with first-round draft picks, Stepp, how do you think that plays into this decision?
I think it has a little bit of a factor into their decision, being a little bit northern versus southern atmosphere. I think that some guys may be more aptitude to go with a little bit more camaraderie in their picks. Are they going to go with their friends, or are they going to go with somebody who's going to be able to get the job done? That decision's really up to them. We'll see how it pans out.
Craig, you're a Chiefs fan. Cleveland being the Browns, what do you think is going to happen there? Do you think they have a good strategy going in, or are they just going to wing it?
I think they'll be very similar to the Browns a little bit at times with some of these picks. They'll maybe miss on a couple guys, but I think the key to this whole thing will be the consistency of the individual. When it comes to this first round pick, the guy that can do all the events on a consistent basis as far as giving good times, good reps in the weight room, and things of that. So I think consistency will be a big key to the picks that they make here.
Tony Giannini, usually a good top performer in the strength category. Do you think he goes conditioning here? CJ, what do you have on that?
I think he does, and the reason I think he does, if you look at the mock drafts, his first pick was slated to be Devin Garcia. He's a guy that's been able to kind of do a little bit of everything. I think that would be a good pick, to be quite honest with you. I'm not too sure that Garcia slides all the way to 4. I think he's going to go before that. But I think that if it's not Garcia, then he may grab another guy or two. For me personally, I have a few guys moving up a little bit more to help out with that conditioning factor.
We'll move on to the first overall pick, who we think will go in that slot. There's been a lot of discussion. Do you go Kenny Ogg, kind of the stable all-around guy, or do you go with Tony Euro? Kind of blows it out in conditioning. Been a little battle with Kenny in the weight room. A couple injuries coming up here late. Who do you think goes number 1 overall?
I think Kenny Ogg has the best chance to go number 1. I think he's got the experience of being in the battle, and I think that with his mindset and his mentality, I think that he fits the bill to be that number 1 guy.
We were all at conditioning this morning. Tony Euro blows it out in Jeff Hill, which is going to be one of the main categories for competition this week. How do you think Kenny's back injury with Tony's kind of willingness to just leave it all out there in conditioning plays a role in that number 1 pick, or do you think it's pretty much a lock?
I think it plays a little bit of a role, but I'm going to agree with Craig a little bit in this too. I think Kenny's more steady. I think he's going to be able to do a lot of these events better than Euro. Euro may be able to blow it out with some of the conditioning events, but I think Kenny's going to be steady all the way throughout. I think one that may stick out to me is I think Kenny, being an all-around athlete, is going to be able to do pretty well in the tips tournament right from the get-go.
We've talked about 2 guys. Anybody see anybody possibly sliding up number 1 overall? Any late performers that we think might come there? Or are we pretty sure it's either one of the 2?
I know from just past experiences, Devontae Washington is a name to watch. I think he's done some good things in the past with these events. Did well last year. He's a competitor. He's going to go 100% all out. I think he's a guy that possibly could maybe sneak into one of those top 2 slots also.
Well, we've talked about the top 3 guys for the most part this segment. We'll switch it over. Who are sleeper picks of the draft? We're looking at the 4 to 5 round guys that maybe slide further down and you can get really good value for the pick.
For me, I've got two guys who I think are sleeper picks. Number one's based on his work today in the Jeff Hill event. Jack Liberatore had the best time of the day. I think he's a guy that's kind of fresh on everybody's mind, and a guy that not a whole lot of people are talking about. That I think will kind of shock some people depending on where he's selected. It's Tom Brosnahan. That's a guy that I think will be a good pick. He's scored well in the events over the last few weeks. He can move some weight in the weight room. I think that he's a guy. He's a guy that may be able to shock some people depending on when he's taken.
I think it's interesting to look with the snake format. We've got Jerry Salisbury with the 4-5 back-to-back picks. I think he could get really good picks out of those first two coming out of those positions. So it's something that we have to keep an eye on. For me, I have Cole Shinsky. I've seen him in the weight room. He really stable guy in the weight room. Did pretty well on Jeff Hill. He's not gonna put up numbers that change the team, but I think in those late rounds he can really do some damage for your team, though.
I'm going to take it on the other flip side of the Cole. I'm going to take Cole Rebels.
Oh yeah.
I think Cole Rebels is an all-around athlete. I think he's an absolute gamer. I think he's a guy that's going to put forth his best in each event, and I think that's something the captains need to start looking more for. Is not a guy that's just going to blow it up in one event and get a lot of points in that way. Somebody's going to be consistent throughout, and I think Cole Rebels does that.
Craig, what do you have on this?
I do agree with both players being mentioned. I also maybe want to add in Aaron Levy. He's a young kid. He's starting to kind of figure some things out. Not only from just the event side of things, but some other things. And I think he's a guy that he's not afraid of the moment. I think he's going to go out there, understand what he needs to do, what his job's going to be for his team in that scene, and I think he'll do well. And I think that's a guy that could be a sleeper pick for somebody.
Well, we've got some great events this week. Just to highlight a few, the five that off the top of my head, they're great events. We've got lappers, which really separates the boys from the men. 300 shuttles. Jeff Hill, as we conditioned already today, earlier. Plate pushes, we've seen how that goes in conditioning, right, CJ? And then the obstacle course to round it out. From those five events, where do you think you could really make up some ground? Is there something where if you stack your team the right way, you think you gain an advantage?
Well, for me, I think that the thing that's going to be the biggest test is the 300-yard shuttles. I think that everybody's going to be okay in the lappers. I think that we've seen over the last little bit that hasn't been a massive challenge. It's been more of a everybody's been a little closer in the lappers. The thing that separates for me is the 300-yard shuttles. When we saw those guys run it, you saw guys that
let's just say we needed more trash cans.
We needed more trash cans. Some guys really got after it. Some guys tried to pull back a little bit. That for me is the event that can change the things for a lot of people, I think.
I think that for me that Jeff Hill is going to be the difference maker because it's more timed in minutes and not so much in seconds. Where the 300 shuttle is more of a seconds related. A guy can finish 5 seconds behind, maybe lose a little bit of traction for his team, but if he can make it up in the Jeff Hill where another team can lose, by 45 or a minute in terms of seconds there, I think that event right there is going to be the difference maker when it comes down to it.
Do you think the legs play a part? I know we have these 5 events, but you're also looking at the weight room with deadlift and that kind of stuff. Do you think being able to get guys that can do the conditioning piece well enough and then save their legs for those weight room aspects, is that something that plays into effect, or do you think it's just a conditioning versus strength kind of category?
I think there's some give and take with that. I think there's certain guys that going into it, the captains are going to be more apt to take them for what they can do in far as moving weight. And some guys are going to be, like a Jack Liberatore is going to be a guy who can go out and prove what he did today and crush Jeff Hill. He's been pretty consistent throughout all of the conditioning things, but what's really going to test him is something he does in the weight room.
Well, we've got some injury updates. We've got Kenny Ogg right now with a bad back. He's battling through that. He's done it all. He's done it really well this fall. We've been talking about the #1 overall pick. You've got Kenny with the bad back. We've got Tony Euro, who's healthy this year, taken pretty high last year, was a bust with the injury in the hamstring. Do you think that plays a factor also in his draft stock and the other injuries that we'll talk about later?
For me, it's a double-edged sword, right? So I think that, in my personal opinion, I don't think that Tony Euro is going to be taken 1-1. And the reason for that is because of last year's injury. Now, on the flip side of that, I do believe that Kenny will be taken 1-1. But for whatever reason, we're forgetting that injury. And again, that's where I look at kind of what Craig alluded to earlier, Devontae Washington. That's where I look at a guy like him, that he's going to be able to kind of slide in there. He's proven he's healthy. He dominated this event last year at a high level on a lot of different events. So for me, there's a couple guys that, you know, if injuries are going to scare you a little bit, then you can steer clear of those guys because of just historically in this event what they've done.
Yeah, I think the injury aspect can definitely affect the challenge. You know, you never know when an injury is going to come up. But I think on the flip side too, for some of these guys that maybe weren't able to compete through the whole process last year, I think maybe they'll be a little bit more motivated to kind of come back this year and show everybody on the team what they're about.
Well, we've got Eddie Cutt with a banged-up wrist, and Coney will see what he can do this week. But those are all things to keep an eye on, see how the draft board kind of dictates those kind of picks down the road. From there, we're just going to wrap it up. Do we have any surprises this draft? Do we think anything's going to happen? Do we have any trade possibilities? I know Buffalo Wild Wings has been a rumor out there. Team sources have said, you know, Buffalo Wild Wings dinner for a pick or two here or there. Do we think anything like that's going to happen, or do we think the captains stay straight and kind of go with their plan throughout the draft?
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think there's going to be any trades. I don't think there's going to be anything else. I think that guys have their list of guys. I think what you may see is towards the bottom, once we get past probably round 3 or 4, that's when things can kind of become a toss-up. I think that most of these guys have their first, second, third round picks probably pretty close to exactly what they want. I don't see a whole lot changing. I don't see there being any trades, anything like that.
It's draft day. You never know. You know, it's a day full of surprises and things of that. You know, when you think something's going to come out and be, you know, the right thing to do, sometimes it's not. You know, so that's kind of the excitement of this draft.
I think the greatest thing moving forward is just being able to see how your teammates view you as a competitor. So as we wrap up this show, we'll send it back to the live coverage, and we'll start the draft here momentarily. Thank you for watching.